Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of WikiTree LiveCast. Today, we're going to be talking with Kirsty Gray, who is the chairperson of the Surname Society in London, and she's got some insight and information she's going to share with us. Oh, and I have my volume up so loud on the, there we go. And so Kirsty is somebody that I really adore. She's great to have around. She's hilarious. She's also incredibly knowledgeable. We're also joined, of course, by Emma Macbeth, the sidekick extraordinary and moderator of our chat. And I am joining you from the guest bedroom of my parents' home in Greenville, South Carolina today. And I apologize. My parents are a floor below me watching football, which is the custom on Thanksgiving weekend in the United States. And if you hear any shouting or yelling, it is just my mom. So we got that out of the thing. So Kirsty is going to do a great presentation for us today on surname studies. Kirsty, you want to take it away?
I can certainly try. I love the introduction that builds me up, and then I think, oh God, can I actually achieve this? Okay, so hopefully now you can see my screen share, which is there, which tells you a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. So I did one of these with Mags. Well, first of all, at OGS, at the Ontario Genealogical Society, we kind of did an impromptu one on the sofas in the cafe. And we did one a little while back, and then she said, can you come along and talk about surname studies? And I'm like, well, yeah, of course. What do you want me to talk about? She's like, well, why the heck would you want to do one? So I thought, okay, yeah, I can do that. So I thought we'd talk about, well, I first entitled it, what is a surname study and why do one? And then I kind of expanded the title as to what is a surname study and why on earth would you want to do one? I think it kind of takes a special kind of person to undertake a surname study. It's really not everyone's cup of tea. And it's not something I think most people set out to do. In most cases, you don't wake up one morning and go, oh my goodness, the one thing I really want to do in my life is do a surname study. Hell no. You just kind of land up in that position. Family historians trace family histories, their own ones. And surname studies are a very different beast. So what I'm going to talk you through today is how surname studies differ from doing your own family history. And quite frankly, what would possess someone to do it? Like, what would the purpose be? What could you achieve? And how might you set about doing it? So firstly, the difference between family historians and surname studies is family historians research their own tree, just their own tree. They collect and analyze data, find details on every branch, twig, leaf, in as much depth as they want to take it. We all know that family historians do this in far greater depth with far greater accuracy in some cases than others. and some people want to know absolutely everything there is to know about the individuals on their tree, grow their tree as much as they can. Surname studies are very different. So surname studies research every single occurrence of a name. That doesn't have to be on a worldwide basis. It could be regional. It could be locational specific. It could be that you just collect them in a particular country or even a particular state or province or county. I think most people recognize that proper surname studies will eventually hope to collect all references on a worldwide basis, but that's certainly by no means a law. So a surname study is a project that researches a surname. So it's not going back and getting all of your grandparents' 4 surnames, and then your great-grandparents' 8, and your great-greats' 16, and your great-great-greats' 32, and all that. It's researching one name as opposed to a particular line of that name. And as I've put on the bottom there, many surname studies collect all occurrences of the surname worldwide, though some restrict their research either initially or forever to one particular region. And that's for a jolly good reason, because if you're a family historian, your tree may initially start out a little bit like this. We all know those people in life that go, "Oh, hello, Emma. How are you doing on your family tree? Have you finished yet?" And you just look at them as if you want to throttle them. Because we all know that this tree is like an ever-expanding jigsaw puzzle. It doesn't have outside pieces, and often it has bits and pieces that are missing for whatever reason. Family history looks a little bit like this, whereas a surname study's trees often look like this. The trees aren't always connected. Sometimes they have absolutely no connectivity whatsoever. And there are a lot of different branches, twigs, completely different trees, different species, different areas, etc., etc. So I'm going to start by telling you a few of the names that I'm aware of that are surname studies. These are names that I used to be very involved with the Guild of One Name Studies back in the day, and then moved towards the more online community that's more accessible to everybody, no matter where they live. And these names were names that actually were registered with the Guild of One Name Studies. When I was the chair of the Guild of One Name Studies, a lot of these people's names were people who were either on the committee or people that I engaged with. Maunder is actually my maiden name. Silliphant is my surname study, so those two bigger names. Kitcher is in my own tree. Lefevre is somebody who's on my current committee, and there are a good few other ones in there as well. Now, some of those names you might look at and go, I've never heard of any of those. But some of them you might go, really? Someone's going to do a surname study on Howes? They must be nuts. And there is somebody doing a surname study on Gray, my current surname. I don't plan on changing that, by the way, but just putting that out there. But, you know, it is what it is. And most people find a name in their family tree and they want to find out more. I mean, for example, some of these names, where did the name Lefevre originate? Actually, the guy who does Lefevre said it's like the French version of Smith. So you can tell that's probably quite an interesting study to do. What is the earliest reference in the United Kingdom to the name Silliphant? Well, I can tell you the answer to that. How many greatheads are there living in England now might be a question that Jan, who does greathead study, might have been wanting to know. Can all the Maunders be traced back to one origin or one family or one location? These are all the kind of questions that you might have in your head when you see those perhaps slightly rarer names. You might want to know what the meaning of a certain surname is or where it came from. Or maybe are you related to somebody that has that, you know, a famous person perhaps like Benedict Cumberbatch? You know, where was the person that I knew, you know, who's doing that, was he actually related to him? And there are so many other questions to answer. And this is sometimes the point when a family history interest really develops into a surname study. So why do it? I found that most people, as I said, don't wake up one morning and go, I really fancy doing a surname study on the name of blah de blah. They will either hit a brick wall, so they'll get to a point where they'll think, I can't find this record, or I've got 3 John whatevers and I can't work out which is which. And they have to be a little bit more creative in their research and maybe collect more than just their line, in terms of their line of Silliphant, for example. You might be going through a set of parish registers, whether online or microfiche or whatever, and you might notice other occurrences of the name that you're researching, but it's not connected, seemingly, to your family. And then if you're at either of those stages, you might feel that if you collect all of those references that you come across, then something might eventually fall into place to actually resolve those problems. Some people are also fascinated by what they might perceive as odd names they discover, and they just want to know more about the individuals and all the individuals who've held that name through the centuries. It doesn't have to be odd, like I say. Howes, Gray, Laws. There are quite a few other more prevalent names, should we say, rather than common, that people are doing on either a local or a global scale. Just to give you a little bit of information about why I started, because as I say, I didn't have this epiphany of waking up when I was about 17 and going, I'm going to do a Silliman surname study. My own study came about probably about 20 or so years ago now. I had a family tree when I was a child that my mum actually had drawn out. Her father was very, very interested in his family history, which I was very grateful for, because he was born as David Day, no middle name, thanks. But he, of course, hadn't done anything on any of the other lines. So that was one of my grandparents. My father's father, so as I mentioned, my maiden name was Maunder, quite unusual unless you live in Devon, and then they're everywhere. But we knew very little about my father's family, because my paternal grandfather had actually passed away when my own father was 8 years old. So we knew very little. And all we had was this absolutely monstrous list of people. We had 13 people listed as him and 12 others, all brothers and sisters, descended from William Francis Maunder and Emma Grace Silliman. And of course, as a child, when I started doing my family history-ish with my mum when I was very young, I was fascinated by this Silliman name. I just thought it was wonderful. It was almost sort of like a fiction character. And so we started doing stuff through the Latter-day Saints, which, of course, people who've been doing their research for many years before the internet. There was a world before the internet, you know. We used to have to go to the Latter-day Saints churches. And the first thing actually I did, without my mum, was to look at the LDS 1881 England and Wales transcription. They're on CDs. I've still got them. Oh, I can't even remember how many CDs, but a ludicrous number. And you used to have to take one out and put the next one in. And before I actually had my own set, I'd written off to a couple of people online and said, I really want to know where my great grandmother is in 1881. She's called Emma Grace Silliman. So I'm thinking, how many of them can there possibly be? Every single person that I asked, because being a scientist, I asked a few because I like to have lots of different evidence to prove that it's right. Every single one came back with this lady on the 1881. Emma Silliman, granddaughter of the head of the household, female, living in Holsworthy, born in Holsworthy, and in fact living in Holsworthy as well, at High Corner. You can probably see from the transcription there, Richard and Darkus. If you say Dorcas with a West Country accent, that's what you get. That's literally what it says on the actual image. So I built my family tree, probably aged about 18, 19, based on the only Emma Silliman that actually was on the indexes. Until I found that actually the tree I'd built was, quite frankly, a biggest pile of brown stuff that anyone could actually create. Because it was totally wrong. Because my Emma wasn't actually transcribed as, or even written as, Emma Silliman. And hopefully you can see from the screenshot there, it was Lillifant. Now this is my great-grandmother, who was nothing to do with Richard and Darkus at all. But I'd built a fantastic family tree, gone back to the 1800s, early 1800s, and it was complete rubbish. Complete codswallop. So I'd already got 2 different family trees. My own, and the other one that I thought for a long time was my own. But it was many years later that I discovered this, and in the interim I'd been corresponding with 2 ladies from New Zealand, who also had Sillimans in their tree via the old Roots web chats and things like that. You can perhaps see, if you look at the actual image itself, why that was transcribed as Lillifant with the L. It doesn't help, but I can kind of understand why somebody transcribing this many decades ago might have thought that was an L. Certainly didn't help my research and cost me quite a few certificates that I didn't need to buy. But never mind. And I just thought I'd share with you a few of the variations, annihilations, transcription errors, call them what you will, that I have to cope with in my surname study. Because you can look at a name and you can hear a name and you can write it the way you think it or read it the way you read it. But actually, when we're doing our research, we have to expect that actually sometimes people weren't all that educated for a start when they're writing these names down. And certainly some of the transcriptions are leave a little bit to be desired. And so these are the issues that I have. The L's are generally transcription errors somewhere along the road. The P's are an absolutely valid surname. The Philiphant and Piliphant and Pelephant are all valid surnames that have been maintained to today. The U, the silly fault, you can probably figure out the N slightly stretched. Silliphant, you can have it as PH, you can have it as an F, you can have it as a V, depending on how well pronounced it is. And people literally wrote what they heard. So I want to talk a little bit about what the purpose of a surname study is. And this is a map of England and Scotland and Ireland and Wales, and Northern Ireland too. And this is the 1881 census mapped by surname. So I've put in my surname of Silliman and all the different variations on a theme that I've managed to locate in the census at the 1881, so 36 years ago, and tried to identify the origin, at least in the United Kingdom, the origin of the name. Sometimes the origin of a name might be from an occupation, like, farmer, baker, thatcher, common-ish surnames over here. They might be like Williamson, which is a bit of a sort of a patronymic type surname. And those kind of surnames often don't have a single origin. Surname studies often, in my experience, try to kind of quantify the rarity of their name. And this is what I've done here with the 1881 census. I found over 50 variant, or I call them deviant spellings so far. And this is a map of where those surname holders are resident in 1881. Now, those with good geography of England will see that there was a rather prominent area down in the West Country of Devon. That's where the 168 marker is, which is where my surname seems to appear most prominently in England. I don't know where Silliphant comes from at the moment, but in England it certainly seems to be a Devonian and slightly over the border into Cornwall name. The other numbers are literally just migrations, either very soon before the census or that kind of time frame, or sort of 10-15 years prior. This is looking at down to the registration district area. Apologies to those of you who are watching if you don't do that much British research, but just to explain a little bit more, when things are registered in the United Kingdom, they're registered in registration districts, which are very similar to poor law. And so drilling down to that level helps me to really know where I need to actually look at in terms of the research that I need to be doing. And Holsworthy is that black area. 82 people out of 273 individual name bearers are living in that Holsworthy registration district in 1881. So between kind of a third and a quarter. So that clearly is where I need to be focusing my studies on that surname. Carrying out a surname study, whether you're doing it individually or as a collective group of people or a bigger society, most people aim to, I won't say make themselves an expert, but certainly be the one person who's focusing on it and be the person that is the go-to person about that name. Now, that can either excite you or scare you. Hopefully the former. But surname studies can be immensely rewarding, both in their ability to offer you new insights into a surname and also improve your research generally. If you're doing a surname that is predominantly in England and Wales, or if you're basing it in an area that is England and Wales, this website will help you to gauge how frequently occurring the name is. Because the first step I would suggest is to collect a lot of resources in terms of documentary, primary sources in terms of the different references, births, marriages, deaths, and so on. Well, don't do that if it looks like your name is the one of the most commonly occurring names in the area that you're looking at, because you're setting yourself up for a lifetime's work. There's also one for the US as well, which again shows you the most frequently occurring surnames from a census in 2000. I haven't managed to find one that's more current than that. And the one in England, the entire database contains over 1 million surnames, which are shared by nearly 56 million people. But names that are shared by fewer than 5 people don't actually appear on the list. So it's a useful gauge just in terms of figuring out whether it's a wise idea to do a surname study on it or not. And this is the ranking of the surnames in the UK one for me, that it's the 20,116th most commonly occurring name. Well, I probably could have told you that it was quite low down the list. And that at any point, there should be about 219 individual name bearers. Obviously, that will fluctuate over the years, but that's pretty accurate. There were more back in the 1881 census, but it has depleted since. And in America, interestingly, you may notice I didn't put Silliman in this one, because Silliman doesn't actually go across the pond so easily. They decide to change their name to Silliman. I don't know why you'd do that. I mean, Silliman is bad enough. Silliman must be worse. This was the 7 pillars of wisdom, as it was kind of built on, was created during my tenure on the committee of the Guild of One Name Studies, as the kind of the 7 things that people would look at when doing a surname study. Certainly not suggesting this is mine. As I say, this was developed and devised during my time on the committee of the Guild of One Name Studies. So we'll take each one individually, very briefly. First of all, just to set your expectations, data collection is an everlasting activity in any surname study, and the documentary event data is the principal aspect. When most family history research tends to kind of converge, as it focuses on finding specific people and connections, by contrast, research within a surname study diverges, widening as you find new references, potentially opening up new areas of inquiry. So with your traditional ancestor hunting, the search goes cold if you can't prove that next generation back. With a surname study, it takes an interest in the kind of continuous presence of a name, irrespective of whether those references are actually, whether you can actually put them or assemble them into family groups. Is reasonably straightforward, in my opinion, to actually collect this data, but it does take considerable time and effort. Later stages are less standard, but I can certainly give you some general sort of guidance in terms of how to begin and how I do it. Not like that. I think that's where some of us might feel that we have larger piles when we start collecting everything to start off with. But you need to come up with some ways of storing and recording all of the data that you have. This is very much a do as I say and not as I do part. If only I'd have started my surname study now, but I started it 20 years ago when I was very green, very new in family history, didn't really know what I was doing generally, let alone on a surname study. So looking back, this is what I would like to have done if I'd have started it back all over again. You can use whatever method you want. Your surname study, if you choose to do one, is of course your own. Nobody from any organization, society, or anything will say you must do it this way, because everybody's study is different. Everybody's way of working is different. The size of your study will be different from the next person. Get organized. Get some simple methods of data storage, whether you're an Apple person or whether you're a PC kind of person or the Mac equivalent. Word, Excel, Access, get some programs organized. People take the mickey out of me. I've got a lot of my trees, my Silliman study trees, in Word. because that's how I started. Does that make it right or wrong? Personally, I don't think it makes it wrong. It works for me. I can always add to them. Yes, they're a bit clunky, and no, I wouldn't do it like that now. But when I started, we didn't have proper family tree programs, or if we did, they were excruciatingly expensive. And I was a student when I first started doing a chemical physics degree, and I didn't have money to spend on family tree programs. So that's how I started. I would recommend digitizing everything you have. When I say that, I'm certainly not implying you get rid of the documents themselves, but this is my way of trying to order everything that I've got. And it's not perfect, but this is my way of trying to digitize everything and put it into some kind of organized fashion. So you might be able to guess, because there are 2 people named on these and there's an M at the beginning, that this is my marriage database. So I've got an M for marriage and then the year. So that automatically orders them. I then have, if it's a General Register Office certificate, then I put the quarter in. So D December, J June, S for September. I can't remember the one I missed now. M for March. If I know where it is, I might have added it on the end, and I'd put the 2 parties. So if I'm looking for somebody of a specific name and married in a particular place or whatever, I can very easily find those. But as I say, each of those is digitized, but I've never ever discarded a paper copy, and I would never do so. I then convert those into a spreadsheet. So this is slightly different. This is my births. This is my births Excel spreadsheet. So I have my birth years. I have my birth quarters. Hindsight, I probably would have done 1, 2, 3, 4, but 1, 2, 3, 4 back then was MJSD, and that's how it's remained. So I've put the information that I have. So I've put in the surname, the first name, the district, the volume, the page, and if I know them, the father's name and their mother's name and the mother's maiden name. I've also put, you might see the darker lines, I've put through a line there to show that there are actually no births in that quarter that I had found when I searched through it. So once you've collected all your data, I haven't gone into too much detail about what, where, how, or when, because obviously that will be very different depending on where your study is. The next 2 steps are your analysis and your synthesis. Now, the analysis is the investigation of that data that you have to maximize the content and value of each item and show how they're linked together. Synthesis is about trying to actually create the trees and actually linking the data, hopefully come up with some hypotheses and then test to see if they're actually going to be correct or not. With a large amount of information to store, it is really important to have the systems in place for linking the stored information. And I know some people who are very techie have hyperlinks between this and that and the other. And I know that Family Historian, you can put a huge amount of notes and things like that in those kind of programs and things. As I say, that's not something that I've managed to do with mine. But those are your next 2 steps. So you've collected an absolute raft of paperwork. You've digitized it, hopefully, all of it, put it onto your PC. And then you're actually going to do something with it. Now, as you do that, you need to have more methods of putting all these things together. And there are a number of different ways you can possibly do this. You could number all the family trees, or you can put them into family group sheets. You can give them geographical labels. You might give them a founder label, or you might combine lots of those things together. You might actually have an individual identification number for each person that's in your study. It depends how techie you are and the way that you store it in the first place. For me, I've got a lot of them that are George Silliman and Margaret Lott or something. Or I might have Dennis Silliman and Petronella, whose surname I don't know. But because I have a relatively small study, that's okay for me. I wouldn't recommend doing that if you had a much bigger study. No one system suits everybody, but there are some common approaches that I've shown you there. When you're looking at your synthesis, when you're looking to do something to actually draw those conclusions, different people will want different things out of their surname study. You've heard me say that a lot of times because it's true. But you can try to get all sorts of conclusions out. You could try to find out illegitimacy rates, social conditions in a certain area, longevity of the family. You could do all sorts of different things, and there are lots of different academics that are getting more involved with names now. There's been a large-scale systematic investigation of family names in the UK, which is the rather not catchy name of FANUC, Family Names in the UK, which was founded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council, I think it's called. And that was a 4-year project based out of the Bristol Centre for Linguistics. And they're getting more involved in kind of the genealogical side of it, as well as how words are written, etc., etc. I remember having a very interesting conversation with them a number of years ago about the fact that Piliphant changed to Silliphant, and they were absolutely sure that I was talking absolute rubbish. I proved them wrong, because of course we're coming at it from a very different way. So the synthesis of the data can include all sorts of different conclusions. As I say, the meaning of the name, the original geographic location where that surname came from, how and where true name variants arose. Why did some of my Silliphants have a P instead of an L instead of an S? So most of the L's are transcription variations. Why did everyone who left England to go to America change their name to Silliman? There are very, very few references to Silliphant in America. All sorts of different things you can come up with. All sorts of things you might want to find out. Mine was very much, I started off with a brick wall, and I've gained even more. But I don't have a great kind of idea of where the name came from, and that's always been a goal. Maybe one day I might find that out. One of the other pillars is responding to inquiries, and I think this is even more relevant now. It's a given to me. It's a given. If somebody writes to me and says, "I'm really interested in the surname Silliphant," well, of course I'm going to write because I want their help. I want to know their part of the tree. But I think the scary part of this for people, they don't put their study out online. They don't kind of publicize it, which I'll come to in a minute, because they're scared that they won't know all the answers. Well, that's not a bad thing. Actually, sometimes collaborating and working with those people, you might get the answers from others. You don't have to know the answer to every inquiry. You might be able to pass some information back, and then hopefully that will encourage them to share information to develop the study back again. And you don't have to know all the answers, and if you don't know, that's okay. No one's going to come along and say, "Oh, well, you can't say that you're the Silliphant surname studier because you don't know the answer to this." So is that you may well have a bit of an ethical dilemma. Those involved heavily in family history, whether it be surname studies or not, sometimes we're presented with things that we really wonder whether we can actually pass on what we know. And you may well have to think very sensitively and carefully about that. On a completely different tack, I did a family history for somebody a few years ago now, many Christmases ago, in fact, about 3 or 4 years ago. And I found out that the person who I was doing the tree for, as in that the tree was going to be presented to, her father had murdered his parents. So very, very close to the person who I was giving this family history binder to. And I decided not to say anything. I put the dates in of both of the grandparents' deaths, and I didn't say anything, and nobody questioned it, and nobody came back and asked and said, "Well, can you find out more?" Which I'm delighted by, thankfully. I was very, very pleased with that one. Which brings me on to kind of publicising what you do. It's so easy now, so easy to publicise what you're doing. You can blog about it, you can have a website, whether that be a GEDCOM-based website or any other kind of website. But at the very least, setting up a Facebook page for a surname study is a piece of cake. It really, really is. You could have a Twitter account. You could put it on Genealogy Wise, which is the National Institute part of their website. You could put something on Google+, Pinterest, LinkedIn, Instagram. I could go on forever. And why wouldn't you? If you're doing all this work, why would you not advertise publicize what you're doing? Surely you, A, want to share it with people who are interested, and B, want to garner information from other people and collaborate. My opinion. I've met many people who say, no, it's just for me. I'm not telling anybody else, which I find a very weird way of looking at it. I mentioned Lefevre earlier on. This is Colin Spencer, good friend of mine, his Facebook page. He has a Facebook page. It's got a couple of pictures on the top, and it directs people to him. He puts some updates on there. There's some interaction. You get out, like with anything, WikiTree or whatever, you get out what you put in. If you don't put much on it, people don't come back and look at it. If you don't engage with people on it, then people won't engage back. But it's a very easy way of capturing people's, they glance across things and capturing their attention. You could publish it. You could publish some of your findings. I know some people are very scared by this. I was originally, because I thought, oh God, I can't publish something. What if it's wrong? And I printed something that was wrong, and I had someone go absolutely ballistic. One of my subscribers to my Simply Silliman journal that I wrote for a little while. But that was fine. I apologized, and she gave me a whole load of records proving I was wrong. Wonderful. Wouldn't have got those otherwise. So again, lots of different ways that you can publish what you're doing. You can put it on WikiTree, you can do genealogy magazines, you can do your own study journal, which I used to do in a printed format, booklets, websites, blogs, put it on Januki, set up a Wikipedia page. There's so much now that we've got the internet. You can make it available very, very, very easily. And that brings me on to what happens when you die, which is the first talk I ever did in genealogy when I was 24. Probably not the best person to do it, but made the best of a bad job. But what you do need to consider is not that you're not going to be here tomorrow, but what's going to happen with your surname study when you're gone, or in the event of something happening. I read many, many, many years ago on a RootsWeb forum, or RootsWeb listing, I think it was, when somebody said, that he'd driven around the corner and seen the police and somebody's hard drive and television smashed all over the floor, all over the road. And he drove around, sort of got past the police and so on, got to his house and discovered actually it was his hard drive with all of his surname study, not backed up, smashed all over the road. And somebody had burgled his house and he'd lost all the work that he'd done. So it is much as important to protect what you've done now, put it out on the cloud, have an external backup position now than we were even 5 years ago, with lots of different methods to do that. You may want to put it online, on Ancestry, on WikiTree, on all sorts of other different places that you can do that. I know some family history societies and archives will have a kind of repository where you can actually put your GEDCOMs or a backup of all of your information. But also think about what happens when you're not here anymore. Who's going to pick up your study? Is anybody going to care what you've done? Do you care if they care? Have you written something that says, when I go, I want so-and-so to have my study, or I want whatever record office? It's something you don't like to think about, but all this hard work, where's it going to go? If you don't care, fine. But I think most of us who are this involved in doing surname studies or family histories, we do care. So make sure you've made that known to somebody somewhere. So before I take questions and things, a little bit of information. There are 2 societies out there, 2 surname societies. The Guild of One Name Studies is very much UK based. It was founded in 1979 in England, although it is a worldwide society, as in anybody who is anywhere in the world can join. Most of the events that they do are over here in England. The Surname Society was set up on very different foundations. We wanted everything to be available to anybody, no matter where they lived. So even our conferences online, everything that we do is online, so that people, no matter where they are, can engage with every single aspect of the society. Can't be in the right time frame for everybody, because that's never going to happen. But we do things at different times so that people can engage no matter where they are. So this is the Guild of One Name Studies website. This is taken today, so 2,966 members with 2,525 different surnames. So that's easy to find. And this is the Surname Society with lots of different resources and things like that, which I won't take you all through, but you can have a look at the 2 different sites. So what is your plan? If you are looking at doing a surname study, if you have already thought about it, or if I've enthused you to take the baton and run with one of those names that you've been inquiring about for a while, set some plans, set some goals, because no matter how small the name is in terms of the number of name bearers, it's a big mission. So you need to have some short-term goals. What's your short-term focus going to be? Which pillar do you want to concentrate on? Maybe you want to just collect all the data you can, first off, and then move that goalpost. What are you hoping to discover? If you don't have a key idea of what it is, you don't know why you're doing it, then why are you doing it? And where do you want to be in a year's time with your study? Because again, if you don't have those goals, you won't get to that point. It's like anything in life. If you don't have a goal, how are you going to get to this unknown thing? So at that point, I will hand over the mantle back to Emma and Mags and say, does anybody have any questions?
Thank you so much, Kirsty. And I do want to point out that Kirsty does have the Silliman name study on WikiTree. Her little elf, Rozs, is actually in our chat and posted the address for everybody, and it's under space /Silliman_name_study. So if you wanted to go and check out the Silliman name study, I think that the categories is starting to fill out. And you'll notice Kirsty Maunder is the person who is the profile manager for that. So Emma, do you have some questions?
Do I personally have questions?
Or just generally?
I do,
any from the community.
There's some from the community as well. So hang on, my computer is freezing, of course. Come on. Doug had a question, had several questions. Well, I know one of his questions was, do you use DNA in any of your name studies?
Yes. Yes, I've had 2 people do DNAs. I'll put my teeth back in. 2 people do DNA testing because we have 2 prominent lines, what I consider to be mine, and my friend who I met through doing the study, Beryl, she's down now in Australia, was in New Zealand, one of the 2 ladies I was mentioning before, and we just were hitting brick walls with just no records in the areas that we needed them to be. So eventually we managed to persuade 2 men, one on each, to test, and it came back with absolutely no similarities whatsoever. So I was like, we can stop now. We don't have to try and find the connection. There isn't one. It was so wildly different. It was just, yeah, there was just nothing. And that was quite a few years ago. I'd like to do more, because there are some other kind of twiggy bits that I can't really connect in. But I probably 4 or 5 years ago tried to do most of the encouragement, and I think it's a bit different now, so I might kind of resurrect the idea again.
Okay. And do you have a way, I'm just asking as a second question, do you have a way that you set up the DNA with your one name studies?
No, it's just set up on Family Tree DNA, and they just all go into the same project. So
you do it through FTDNA?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not involved heavily enough for. I don't really. I mean, I have kits that I can pass on to people, but I am by no means a DNA expert. I leave that to Mags. I know. I know my place. Not there.
His other question was, he wanted to know where to create a UK surname map based on census counts.
There is the map that I showed is something called Surname Atlas, and it's available from Steve Archer's website, which I will just find, and I'll put it in the Hangout and somebody can put it where you guys need it.
Okay.
But he basically designed the software, created the software, and he sells them from his website. So I will find the link and post it in the relevant place. But yeah, that's where it's from, and it's available. It doesn't work on Macs, I don't think.
Oh, that's all I
Yeah.
have.
Yeah, it works on Windows 10, 8, 7, Vista, XP, it says. So I'll pop that on there, and you guys can put it wherever you need it.
So I have a question myself. I mentioned last time we talked about my Zorn's name study, and the purpose of me wanting to do that is because there's a big argument who the common ancestors' parents are.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're talking about going farther back, you know, we can't use more modern census data. And where do you gather that information? The older stuff.
Here, I mean, I'm certainly by no means an expert across the globe, but here it would be going back to parish registers and what we would refer to as parish chest documents, which are all sorts of things. I could do an entire another session on all of the parish chest documents, but things like poor law records, there's church, what are they called? Church wardens accounts, board of guardians books, school records. There's a whole heap of stuff prior to 1837, which is when our civil registration starts, and 1841 for the census. Of course, it is harder, and if you have two families that are both William Silliphant marrying an Emma, then I want to go back to 1820 and tell them not to do it, but. But yeah, it's looking at different sets of documents, and it's a bit more of a challenge.
So would you start with the most recent common ancestor that you agree on?
Yes.
Gather all the data from where they live, and then try to work your way back.
Yep, absolutely. Start with current, and then work your way back, just the same as you would with a family history, Emma, to be honest.
Yeah. Was there another question, Max? I
thought there was, but I don't know if we want to ask her that one.
Oh, Lord.
But we have, somebody wanted to know why you left the Guild of One Name study.
Oh, that's what that was. Yeah.
That's not a conversation for today.
I didn't think it would be. So my question for you, Kirsty, was we have a lot of people who ask in WikiTree's G2G forum, which is our genealogist to genealogist forum. People ask questions about language-based surnames, and that there are different rules. Spanish surnames throw people off. Do you have any advice or information that people could use on doing Spanish surnames?
Only moderate. So I'm certainly, pricing this with, this is my experience. I'm certainly not an expert. But we did some research. My company did some research recently, which took us back to ordering Spanish documents, and also from my younger days, when I was on a Spanish exchange. I remember that the two surnames of the mother and the father are kind of put together. So if I was born in Spain, then my first name probably wouldn't be Kirsty, but it would be Kirsty Maunder Day when I was born, because my mum's maiden name was Day. So they kind of put the two, although generally they're kind of known by, just as you would be known by the father's surname, but they put the two together on all the records, which of course for us is like, yay, hurrah. It makes it a lot easier. So yeah, I mean, certainly in Spain, I mean, I was saying to you before we went live, Mags, the Spanish birth certificate I was telling you about, I've never seen one before, and I'm sure probably a lot of people haven't, but it has, if I was born in Spain, it would have both my parents and their parents on the actual certificate, which I was just boggled by. It was just like, why can we not do that here?
Isn't that helpful?
Why do they not do that everywhere?
Yeah.
So yeah, that was pretty awesome.
The other question we had were, and you were mentioning actually Scandinavian surnames were a bit different as well.
How would you do a name study for that when they don't have the same surname?
I don't think I'd bother, to be honest. I don't know anybody that is doing one. But I mean, again, certainly not the expert, but I know that there's sort of like the son, like I was saying about Williamson. it's son of William. And the same is true, I believe, in Scandinavian countries, where it's sort of like Henrik's daughter. I know there's an athlete called with the surname of Henrik's daughter, as in she's the daughter of Henrik.
Right.
So I think it's that, and then the daughter if they're daughter, and then so and so son. So that's why you get Larson, because it's Lars's son.
Mhm.
So that's why a lot of them kind of are created like that. So I presume that Ulrika Johnson was probably son of. No, let's not go there. I'm kidding.
Emma and you, we were talking earlier before the broadcast. Do you have a little bit of information on the Quebecois, the dip names, or?
Yes, and that kind of throws a wrench in the works, because what happened is so many cousins marrying cousins, they had to find a way to distinguish one surname from another family cluster from each other. And so they used the deep names as kind of an add-on to their surnames to distinguish themselves from a different family cluster with the same name. Usually the same surnames will have a deep name for that surname. So it's really not that hard, because you won't have a deep name for 3 different surnames. It fits with just one surname.
Right. All right, cool. And Kirsty, the last question, and probably the one that people ask the most in our G2G forum is, how did surnames start?
I love that. Just throw that in like a firework.
How did they start?
Well, a lot of it. Well, there's loads of different sources. I mean, I mentioned about Baker, Thatcher, things like that. People created surnames, for want of a better way of putting it, from all sorts of different things. It could be a place. So you may have a place that then the people that lived in that place when surnames were created will all have that surname. So you may be able to kind of go back and go, that's where those are from. I wish I could do that with Silliman, but clearly not. Those ones will be more location specific, whereas people like Baker, Thatcher, Smith, they're more generic. They're from they're from a different occupation. But yeah, I think that's probably I'm setting myself up for like 2018 to join you guys again here. One on that, one on English records. We'll just get the dates in.
Oh, we can have you back as many times as we can. We always love having you.
Very kind. Well, sorry, I'm a bit bunged up this evening. I was saying to the ladies before I joined, I've been desperately dosing up on everything today, so I don't look like death warmed up. So apologies for the slight croak and blah.
And I'm wondering who it is she's calling ladies. I'm looking around. I don't see any.
I just thought you knew.
Not being in my WikiTree orange, I forgot my orange shirt, but I do have on a T-shirt for the Clemson Tigers, who are playing tonight, and there is a big orange tiger.
Orange.
On the
not
shirt.
Quite as orange as your WikiTree
no,
one.
It's not. But do we have any other information? Any other questions? Anything else? Emma, anything from you? We've lost Emma. Nope.
No,
she's there. She's thinking.
I'm also checking the feed to see if there's any more questions.
Yeah, I was going to fill in while you were thinking, Emma, but go ahead.
I was just going to say, so on WikiTree, we have One Name Studies,
right?
Where we can set that up through the One Name Study project. And so I know you talked about first steps. One, you need a goal. I have a goal for mine, which is, figure out who the actual parents are of the next line. What would you say the first step is? Gather names?
Yeah, because you don't know who those people are. Do you know where they might potentially have married or baptized their child, or the child may have been born?
Yes.
Okay, so the first step of yours would be to search those records in that area and collect the lot. Don't just go with the kind of family historian mindset of, I just need to find this, like this one thing. Collect every occurrence of the name, because you never know how useful that might be. And look out for the kind of variations, deviations, generally complete annihilations of the name as you go, because No. Annihilations, not derivations. That's totally different. Because I mean, like I said, you know, I gave you some of the different names. I've got 50 different variations and deviations of
Deviants.
surname. Yeah,
I heard you say deviants.
Deviants.
Just saying.
Yeah, variants and deviants. So I have 50. I have more than 50 now.
Wow.
So yeah. But if you think about, I mean, the name that you're talking about doing, Emma, you know, if you say it out loud, think how many different ways that can be written.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. Even though it's a very uncommon name, but I can still in my mind figure out.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably pronounced Silliman here, not Silly Man. I'm just
no. It's Silly Man. It's 100% Silly Man.
And if I ever meet anybody named Silly Man, I'm going to know they're related to you.
Yeah,
my favorite silly font.
Yes.
Kirsty,
I've never actually seen a silly fart yet.
Oh, a silly fart. Okay. This is starting to deteriorate into like one of our for the Source-a-thon after we've been up for 72 hours. We really appreciate you coming in and chatting with us.
Welcome.
And we love that you have your Silliman name study, surname study on WikiTree. It's great. It's great information. Rozs, thank you so much for working so hard to get some of that information up as well. And Angie, I know North Carolina, South Carolina, we need more records online. We need more deeds, more wills. Find them and digitize them, as Kirsty said. Digitize everything and just put it up. So
we can use her example on WikiTree to follow.
No. No, not at all, Emma. No. No, I think Rozs has done 95%, probably 98% of what's on there. No, not at all. I've put very little up there, and as I say, most of the bits that are up there are what Rozs has done. So
I mean,
do not use mine as an example.
We can use Rozs as example.
Yes, exactly that.
Yes, and Rozs is working on the Silliman name study for Kirsty with Kirsty's complete knowledge and permission. There should be a couple more disclaimers in there. Yes.
Look, Kirsty is very grateful for everything that Rozs does to help her get her study online.
I wanted to do one plug here. Everybody loves A.J. Jacobs, and I just wanted to point out that this beautiful book is out now that you can buy. Barnes & Noble's, Amazon, in Canada, Chapters Indigo. I have been reading it. It is a great read, and I have to tell you that there's a whole page in here dedicated to our favorite WikiTree elf, Eowyn Langhoff. So hop to the store and buy this, and you can read a little bit about Eowyn and how that whole global family reunion happened. We thank our guest Kirsty for being here. Thanks, Emma, for always being our moderator for the chat questions. And we will see you next time. I believe we're coming up with an Adoption Angels LiveCast at the end of December the 28th. So in between your Christmas holiday and your New Year's holiday, sit back on a Saturday afternoon and enjoy hearing about WikiTree's Adoption Angels project. We'll see you then. Thanks very much for being here.
Bye.
Bye.